lovely to meet you, Will. Thank you so much for coming to Swansea tonight. Yeah, my mum and dad are in the audience. I've got the Hayward. My mum and dad, I should say. I thought I'd start, because I'm sure people have read your articles. I'd like to know a little bit about you and your motivations for what you do. I was surprised, and I'm sorry to address the elephant in the room straight away, found out you're not Welsh. And this was in December 2024, when Will wrote a great article about his first time realising that he wanted to write more about Wales and wanted to embed himself in Wales. And you know, you may very well consider yourself Welsh now. You absolutely, you know, wouldn't be surprised if you do. But given your, your work here. But what was that motivation? How did that motivation start in the Llanelli Valley? Was it? Is that right? If I remember this right?
So yeah, that story in the Llanelli Valley was. So when I started at Welsh in 2016, well done for getting past the adverts. Nothing's more exciting than someone trying to sell you a Honda when you're trying to read an So the first, there's two kind of types of stories I did to start with. We did a series around violence against women. It was focused on the new coercive control laws that come in for the first time. And I got to interview the survivor of the first successful conviction in a coercive control case in Wales. And that, I think, because it was something that just so intrinsically mattered, I think that was such a big thing to start your career covering. I think that really helped initially. The piece you were talking about with Llanelli Valley was, I basically would just go to places in Wales and chat to people for ages, go and sit in the Wetherspoons, put on Twitter that I was going to be there, and people would come talk to me. It was the best and worst experience of my life, because people, I mean, you think people talk to you at Wetherspoons, the Maested Wetherspoons, people absolutely talk to you. One guy grabbed me by the collar and said, "Do you know why this valley's wider?" Because it was made by a glacier and not a river. And I was like, wow. Do you know what he said 20 minutes later? Do you know why this valley's wider? 4 times I learned about that valley. But it was great. I went to, basically, my state had been found to have the second highest rate of child poverty in Wales, as well as this basically spike in crime. And people I'd spoken to from there were really frustrated about how it was being covered. And so the idea was to go and talk about issues, but from the point of view of the people who live there and why this is a home for people, not somewhere just to talk about as issues. And I ended up going to a diabetes support group where more biscuits were distributed than I've ever known. And I was there and I was chatting to some people in there. I said, "Oh, so where are you from?" And so, "I'm from Cairo." And they all said, "Oh yeah, she's from a long way away." I was like, I think we can walk. And then another said, "Oh, I'm a foreigner here, I'm from the Rhondda." Yeah, within the space of about 10 minutes, this group of women knew my name, they knew my mum's name, which I didn't think would be relevant. They wanted to know if I had a girlfriend, they wanted to know if I was going to marry my girlfriend. They were like, "We think that like Mark Zuckerberg is good at data collection." For women of the Llanelli Valley. And it was, I think that just, I've lived in Wales since 2008, and I've studied here and I've done some jobs here, but never, being a journalist somewhere, if you can do it right, you have to get to know it. And I think that was the first time I was really getting to know Wales. And then when I started covering politics, I think partly because I love an underdog, also because I'm like a West Brom fan, so I couldn't believe how obviously screwed over Wales was being. It was very, I think, as a journalist, you want a cause. And it was kind of that dual thing of seeing, well, there is clearly some absolute shit going on. And in this wonderful, lovely place, which I want to live. And I think that was kind of the start of it. And then, yeah, people seem to accept me.
So writing this book, it's a massive endeavour. Was it your initiative straight away to kind of think, right, I'm going to cover all these areas, or did you just start with one and keep going down different rabbit holes?
I think the idea of kind of doing it from how Wales has been kind of screwed by both its government in Westminster and in Cardiff Bay in different ways. I think that was something that had been coming up for kind of 5 or 6 years that I'd wanted to do. And that's when I pitched the initial idea. But when the book was accepted, the rise of kind of the extreme right in Wales and the wider UK and the world has been obvious for a very long time, but it really seemed to hit home over the last kind of 18 months, the reality of the direction of travel we could potentially be in. And that kind of changed how I was looking at it, because I wanted people in Wales, the subtitle of the book is Why the Welsh Need to Get Angry, and I had a real chat with the publisher, like, do we want to make people more angry in a world like this? Like, people are angry enough, every single algorithm is trying to make you angry. And we kind of decided that there's different kinds of anger. There's that anger, kind of that feeling of impotence and able to fix clear problems. And then there's that kind of righteous anger that really does drive change. And I think it's inevitable people are going to be angry, because how can you look at the situation in communities all over Wales and in public services and not be angry? But the idea was to equip them to be angry at the right thing, and ultimately I think the blame is almost always the politician in the suit, not the migrant in the boat.
There's a mindset within the UK, but also in Wales itself, the Welsh can't do it themselves. Not necessarily in this room, I shouldn't say, but there is this, I remember around the devolution vote, there was just this idea that, oh, we can't let us, we can't go on government to do it. And I wonder where that comes from. I was thinking, is it to do with, if you think of devolution, this is the late 90s, this is after, industrialisation, closure of the mine, all the awful things that went on in Wales, and the steel as well in Swansea, I should say, in South Wales. There could be other issues, it could be to do with, the Welsh minds to do with religion, or I don't know, I was wondering where you think that comes from, this idea of the Welsh people thinking, we can't do this ourselves.
You can point to history, you can point to geography, you can point to economics. But I think it's one of the, I've written a book about Welsh independence as an Englishman, and I think the reason that was quite well received was because I wasn't coming at that from the heart, I was coming from the head, but still treating it as an issue which deserved attention, whether or not you agree with Welsh independence or not. So I think, for me, I wouldn't feel like I could say, oh, this is why Wales is the way it is, but I think as someone who's moved here and has made his home here and now is in a long-term relationship with a Welsh woman, so can't leave, I think I have got enough skin in the game to say, well, this is where we are. We don't want to be here. Let's try and get to here. So I don't think I could I don't think I'd be qualified to say why we're where we are, but I think I probably am. I've got as much right as anyone to say, well, let's stop things like that.
Just even little things like you drop these little details, like Keir Starmer talking at a Welsh Labour event, and he doesn't even say Elined. He just says Eleanor throughout. And there are, you could say, okay, it's a mistake, but that's not just a mistake. It's about respect, and it's about spending time, and would that happen with other people, or would that happen with other names? Would that happen with other cultures, languages? And there's this idea that, when we get into the economics of it, Wales isn't even trusted to kind of, there's a brilliant dissection of, how the Barnett formula works, as I was saying.
I've been invited to this inner Welsh Labour Party at the wider Labour conference, and the special advisor, who I think had been a bit reticent to let me come to the party, fairly understandably, as soon as he said Eleanor, she went, saw me, and I just saw her go, and I turned to one of the other special advisors who was next to me, and I said, just call her Eleanor. And he went, yeah, he always struggles with that. But I also think when it's the only other political leader of a nation in the country in which you operate, I think it's probably worth. I don't think the pronunciation would be an issue if it wasn't all the other things. Just like I don't think it'd be an issue Wales not being on the Union Jack if you didn't have all of the other shit. Like if it was just that, then you'd be like, fine, but it's in fact it symbolises so much more. But I think the problem, one of the challenges we've had in Wales in terms of how Welsh government has operated is, I think, because Wales, especially in the first referendum, the referendum in 98, yeah, it was introduced in 99, was it? Sorry. Wales linked into that, and I think Welsh has always been a bit worried about, especially initially, because they were aware that almost as many people didn't want this as did want it, that they never wanted to give enough ammunition. If you want to do something bold and really dynamic or do something really different, there was always a fear that, oh God, well, we might get criticised here. Like, whereas I think the fact that even our universities, it's just we operate exactly the same as universities in England, essentially. We're just part of that. We have never had in the 26 years, the Welsh Government has never had the kind of backbone to really say, well, actually, what do we want our university sector in Wales to do specifically? And I think one of the reasons why, in a way, devolution has created a similar thing to the wider UK, with a large capital in the southeast that is perceived to take in resources, young people. And I think there's been a lack of boldness with devolution, which I think does stem from the idea that it's still, in Wales, we're kind of still apologising for the fact we've got our own democracy.
Talk about, you were at Hay recently, and the Reform MS, James Evans, said about, this is about the Crown, I can't remember this.
It was asked about the devolution of the Crown Estate.
Devolution of the Crown Estate. I don't think it should be devolved, for the simple reason being, if you devolve it, you have to set up an office to run it in Wales. And we're not very good in Wales at being efficient in running things, says a man who's been elected. Yeah, so you're also dealing with elected representatives.
When we talk about HS2, initially the Welsh Conservatives actually didn't want Wales. The Welsh Conservatives didn't want Wales to get a bit consequential from HS2. Which, why don't you want your country to get £5 billion? Like, why don't you want that? And then they realised, well, actually, this is a bit of an untenable position. Even Andrew Davies reached that conclusion. At an untenable position. Obviously, he did it by going, untenable position! But the thing was, then when they could bring themselves to say that Wales should have this money, what they said was, we think it should go to National Rail, and they should allocate it. It shouldn't go to the Welsh Government. The Welsh Government shouldn't get this money. And nothing says more, I don't think we're ever going to be sat in that chair, than saying, oh, I don't want to equip Wales. And I think that hurts Wales, not just because you've got elected politicians trying not to equip it, but it also hurts Wales because if that's the alternative, it enables whoever's actually running the Welsh Government to be pretty abject a lot of the time because the alternative is worse. Like, I genuinely think opposition isn't just, you've done that wrong, this is bad. I think that's an element to it. You have to really on the whoever's in power. But real opposition comes from offering a really credible alternative and vision, because when you do that, it means that people have to raise their game, don't they? And I think that's that should. I mean, I make that kind of argument with Welsh independence. I think if you look at polls, more people in Wales don't want independence than do want independence. But when you do ask people who don't want independence, a lot of them say, well, I like the idea, but I don't think we can afford it, or we don't think it would work. And actually, if the only rationale for staying in the UK is, well, I don't think it would work outside, that demonstrates that there's not a huge amount of love for the UK in itself. And I think if the UK was if the UK was then to basically, if Wales were to advocate more for itself, it would mean that the UK itself has to raise the game. Because I genuinely, I mean, I say this in the book, I think it's in the interest of everyone, whether you support Welsh independence or not, to get Wales to a point where it could be independent. Yeah. Because then, the UK as a whole has to continue to justify itself to its people. Every country should be justifying itself to its people.
Yeah. You talk about how Wales gets money from the Treasury, this is Wales' money, Wales is careful financially, we might have some money left over, etc., but the Treasury limits it to an arbitrary total of 350 million. The Treasury then tells Wales it's only allowed up half of that in any 1 year. That is one example of a slightly, it isn't quite infantilising in a way, the kind of way that the devolved government's treated, there. And you give other examples of that in the book as well.
It's basically how much Wales can carry over from one budget to the next. Anyone who's worked, especially in a public sector organisation, will know you get to the end of the year, you've got £2,000 left over, and you think, shit, we've got to buy some chairs. Let's get that contractor, but we'll pay them now and they can do the work in August. Yeah. We don't get that in independent journalism because we don't have any money. But with Wales, we have a budget of 27 billion and we can carry over 350 million, which is a fraction. But if we were to carry over 350 million, the next year we're only allowed to spend 125 million of that. So even though that's our money that we've carried over, just not allowed to. Scotland can. Scotland has not only can carry over more money, which, to be fair, they have a bigger budget, fair enough, but why can they spend all of it? And also why, from 2016 to 2026, was Wales is frozen, so it did increase with inflation, but Scotland did. Why every year was Wales able to borrow proportionally less, especially after these trusts? Like, that's now changed. That is something that Labour have done after coming in, is that Wales is now linked to inflation, but they haven't backdated it. They haven't done it, so we're 100 billion, well, I think in terms of borrowing, I think we're about 150 million less that we could borrow now than if it had gone up with inflation. I can't remember off the top of my head what inflation is.
That's okay.
There's 97,000 words. But yes, the system, it doesn't not equip Wales to succeed. It's designed in a way that I don't think it can help it fail.
I'm a Welsh journalist who lives in Wales, and I have to fight to get anything that mentions about Wales into arts and culture sections of newspapers and magazines. And these are with understanding and nice editors. Because they always go, we've done a Welsh piece tech, we'll do another one in 3 months. What resistance do you come across in terms of the work that you do? I know you write for The Guardian, I'm a freelancer, so I can say what I like. But I've had situations where I've written book reviews about Richard King's Brittle with Relics, very serious, lots of stuff about Aberfan in there, and Injustice in the 60s, which was illustrated with a black and white photograph of a man eating a daffodil in the newspaper. And I had to basically say, can you please take that off online, because it's not appropriate. You know, that's what Wales was to that picture editor. And every Welsh journalist I talk to, I'm pleased with this, has this fight sometimes to make Wales look serious, or Wales' issues to be important in a national sphere, just as Welsh politics is fighting to be listened to at a national scale.
I think it is a challenge. So I can only speak from the Guardian perspective. So I do occasionally freelance for other places, but it just makes more financial sense just to put it in the newsletter. Like, I'd rather give the journalism to people who are directly supporting me than go via an intermediary who's probably based in the Cayman Islands. I think what I try and do with... I genuinely don't think, and I think actually quite often from the UK government perspective as well, I don't think there's often malicious intent behind it. I think it's kind of worse. I think it's just complete apathy. And like the amount of times I'll be writing the guidance, I said the Welsh Parliament, I say it, and they'll have added, Elena Morgan has spoken to Parliament. I'm like, no, UK Parliament. Or, Parliament in London, Westminster, like, there's 2 parliaments that we're talking about in this article. And it's because, and do you know what? I totally get it. If I was a London-based journalist writing for a UK audience, and you said to me, right, you've got 70 million people you're writing for, and 3 million of them happen to be in this spot, I'm inevitably going to write for the majority of that audience. It's the same reason why Wales Online feels like South Wales Online, and sometimes feels like Cardiff Online. Like, it shouldn't be like that, but I get how they've got there, and I understand it. And I think what I always try and do is, when I'm writing for them, like when I first got the gig with The Guardian, so we're in the circle of trust now, this is a bit when I first started writing, so I initially got offered a role as like kind of a political correspondent, and they said, I said, well, will I be covering Wales? And they said, oh, you will cover Wales, but you'll also cover other things. I was like, I knew that was covert. You're going to cover Wales if Vaughan Geffin resigns. You're not going to cover Wales for Wales' sake. So that's why I said no, and I ended up going off on my own, and then they offered me a columnist role, and they've been really, really good with that. But I feel like I always, when I first got told about writing a column, they said, you've got to remember that this has to be understandable for someone who lives in America, because that's where loads of their readers are. And that's fair. Like, fair enough. Like, that's fair audience. So what I try and do with my pitching, I think what's probably helped about being at Wales Online, because Wales Online is so click and traffic focused, I'm quite good at working out, right, I know what's going to drive an audience, which is what they want, and then I have to think, right, how am I going to do this in a way that, mostly my main priority is, don't tell them, is that people in Wales go, oh yes, we feel represented in this, or we've learned something, or I'm glad that the rest of the UK is aware of this issue, and I think that happened with things like HS2. So, I get how it's happened, I get why it's happened, but it also, that's kind of, now I could give you, in 2 weeks' time, I can give you a much better answer to this because I've got an announcement which I can't tell you now. Hello, little ghosts.
Have you been made Prince of Wales? Well, you do write about it.
As a Republican, I think.
Yes.
As an English Republican, probably got as much right to it as William has.
I was going to say.
But I think my attitude is always, we're never going to get to a point where London-based media is going, oh yeah, what's going on the same time? It's really, really interesting. Have you seen what Peter Fox has said in the Agricultural Committee? We're never ever going to, that's never going to happen. It's just not the point we're going to get to. So my attitude is, excuse my language, fuck them. Like, Wales' devolved consciousness really woke up during the pandemic. And I think the most important thing is how we build our own media here. And that is, as much as I can tell you about the announcement that's coming, but I think that is where we kind of need to get to. Like, Scotland will get annoyed about disrespect from England, English media, but they'll also spend most of their conversations having the conversations with themselves within their own media. I think that is the point we need to get towards.
What things have you seen happening in Wales? And you know, I know we're very early on in the new administration now, that give you kind of a sense of hope. You know, and it may be, you know, I know obviously audiences help, you know, kind of, and political engagement on a local level might be one of those things too. But has there been anything within the political spectrum in the last, you know, few years you thought, you know, actually the Welsh curriculum is really good, or the this is really, you know, this is the right move?
It's only really good if it's properly resourced. We've brought in, with the new curriculum and foundation phase, we've basically brought in something which is better if you resource it properly, but it's actually worse if you don't. And basically it works really well for kids which are coming with a thirst for knowledge from a family that have put a value in education, and it will be worse for kids of lower attainment. Putting aside that, because this was supposed to be a positive question.
It was a positive.
I think, I mean, contrary to what every single Reform MS is saying, I'm not a Plaid Cymru supporter. But one thing that does make me feel more positive for the future is I think everyone could agree. I mean, even Labour was saying something needed to change, and you can't make change without there being some change. And for the first time ever, since Wales had its own parliament, we've got a change. And I think what's heartening about what I hear in the Senate at the moment is, from the governing party, I feel at least they are talking about some of the issues which are actually issues. We're not debate, and they're also not afraid to cause a fuss. I've got deep reservation. I'm conscious that the problem is every time I say I've Plaid Cymru in my newsletter, I get about 100 unsubscribes. But I am also conscious that Plaid have got a really, really, really hard job. And well, they've got a hard job, but there's also there's low hanging fruit. Like I don't think that the devolved government over the last 26 years have left no stone unturned with the tools they've got available to them. We haven't used our full borrowing capacity. I'm here complaining that we don't have much borrowing capacity. Most of the time we didn't use it. Like, you've got like 40% of 0 to 4-year-olds are in poverty, and we haven't used our full borrowing capacity. Like, talk about a lack of ambition. Like, come on. So at least, sorry, this is my third talk of the day. I'm not angry with you guys. At least there is impetus that there is a serious problem now, and things need to change. And I think the most frustrating thing about covering Welsh politics for the previous 10 years was the very obvious thing that there was all of these issues. That we had that issue of child poverty that I said, and every time you talk to anyone, they say, well, isn't the future generation, is that groundbreaking legislation? I'm like, kids haven't got food.
What are you thinking about chances of Wales having stronger connections with European countries now, or maybe stronger political affiliations with the EU as we stand in, you know, June 2026?
Obvious to the vast majority of people now that closer relations with Europe are just a self-evident good. So I'm hopeful, because I think actually the energy has. If you're on the right of politics, talking about Brexit now doesn't yield you that much return, even among the people who are inclined to agree with you. So we saw our First Minister having conversations with people in Europe just over the last few days. I think there is real reasons to hope that after a decade, sensible heads might prevail. What
What would you find most shocking or surprising that you hadn't learned before when you were researching this book?
I mean, the finance section, I couldn't believe how, like, I thought I was going to have to really look around for some stuff, but I was like, oh God, it's actually just obvious. Just look at this treasury spreadsheet, like, it's just there. I think with arts and culture, I couldn't believe how little we funded it, even compared to other parts of the UK. I think the environment, like, I consider myself really passionate about the environment. I basically just want to be a journalist to save up enough money to buy some land and rewild it on my own. But I couldn't believe the state of nature deprivation in Wales, like especially in areas which are supposed to be kind of like crown jewels. I think also housing. So housing for me is like, it's kind of the chicken and the egg of so many issues. When you talk to people who voted Brexit, who vote Reform, housing is one of their like top priorities, and housing is kind of like poverty, like. So with poverty, like all the issues in health, education, the economy, all are all caused by poverty. But all of those issues then cause poverty. So I say it's like the chicken and the egg, and I couldn't believe the kind of cycle that we kind of got ourselves in, partly for austerity, partly through mismanagement. I also couldn't believe how patchwork some governance in Wales was.
What do you mean by that?
It's the sheer volume of. Now, I'm not advocating for like massive like delayering, but 7 health boards whose systems don't all talk to each other is insane. In a country of 3 million, when you're the size of Greater Manchester in population, 22 local authorities who, like, during the pandemic, we had that huge outbreak in Newport, didn't we, to start with, where everything was starting in Newport. I work in Newport, it's fine. We wanted to move nurses over to an Iron Bevan from Cardiff and Vale, and it was like moving an employee from Tesco to Sainsbury's. Like, why have we made this? And I think the lack of, it means that we have all the disadvantages of being a small country with none of the advantages. Like, Wales, if you want to talk about hope, and good to finish on this, I think what the most exciting thing about covering Wales and living in Wales at a time that things are changing is that Wales is big enough to matter, to have some economies of scale, but it's small enough to get enough that you can actually get everyone around the table. You don't need to convince that many people for meaningful change to happen. So I think Wales, if you wanted to make something happen, it's easier to make it happen in Wales than it is in England. So I think, yeah, we're in a hole, but we have got plenty of others.
It's been 40 years since Welsh industry has been dismantled, and communities are still struggling across the country. How does Wales fix the problem?
Oh yeah, I understand that. I've got an economics lecture at LSE after this. I actually think one of the best things that Wales can do is, we talked about not trying to just be a smaller England. Like, when you're a country the size of England, you can do lots of things okay. You can have loads of small industries, whereas in Wales, I actually think the best thing you can do, and evidence from other small countries, is that being really, really good at a few things is better than being at lots of smaller ones. And it sounds counterintuitive because you think, well, you're really committed to stuff. I'm not saying let's open some minds, but like there are, we talk about in the book, like arts and culture is like could be like we see it with like Bad Wolf. I think.
Everyone know Bad Wolf in Cardiff. I assume it's a big TV production company. Did Doctor Who and loads of big.
And the difference with that was the Welsh government had some foresight, and they basically gave them some money to locate permanently in Cardiff, because how it normally works with production companies is they go, we're going to put something on, they go to about 20 cities and say, how much are you going to pay me to base ourselves here, whereas Bad Wolf are based in Wales. So we've basically created something that's paid for itself like 10 times.
And they're not only based in Wales, they use so many Welsh locations, Welsh businesses. I was at Hay talking to the Castellano Bennett sister, because I do lots of different things, and that was, made in Wales, the Lake District is actually Ban Ebrachoniog, etc., and I just thought, I know that's in Bridgend. But it's like Industry is another show which looks like it's filmed in New York, it's filmed in Cardiff. It's incredible, and this all, how art and culture can nurture economies, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of all know why, but like it seems just ridiculous to me that Wales isn't the world leader in tidal energy when you just look at art. And like people say, well, actually, you know, it wouldn't make us that much money selling energy back into the grid. I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're at a point in time where every country in the world, well, apart from America, wants to become greener and generate green energy. It's not about the energy you export, it's about the expertise you export. So I think 2 or 3 industries, I think, the great thing about arts and culture, like I kind of postulate in the, I think we did it in the newsletter recently about making the arts and culture elite in Wales, and I don't mean elitist, I mean elite. So if you are a talented flautist, the best place for you to be in the UK should be in Wales, and that, and actually because we spend so little on it, like doubling spending isn't that much, and actually it's one of those things that I think it's about creating a Welsh brand. I hate the word brand, but a Welsh brand which you're operating within a UK market, and actually at a time that kind of Englishness has never been cool, less cool. I think they're cool, and I'm saying that as, you know, a self-hater. I don't think you should do it. But having a cool Cymru could be, I think, an absolute asset.
Yeah, and there's also, you know, clearly.
I know there was a cool Cymru as well.
Yeah.
I don't just think Wales started when I arrived.
Thinking of that has made me think of, you know, where here we are, Volcano Theatre in Swansea. You know, it's amazing. You know, you've been talking to people about how it used to be B-Jams in Iceland and Lewis and all these different places. But we're in a great part of Swansea for the idea of art and culture regenerating places. And leads me to this. What's your view of Swansea at the moment? And I assume that means politically and economically. Or it might mean, do you like Swansea?
I did quite a bit during the tidal lagoon stuff. I think Swansea and to a extent Newport as well are examples of kind of wasted opportunity. I genuinely believe that we talk about how like cities really do work. I'm from a more rural background, but cities are demonstrably across the world a really efficient way of having large amounts of people. They can be incredibly good economic generators, they can be really good for education, and it's much easier to deliver a really good health service in the city than it is spread across all the powers. So I think there's been a lack of attention on the second and third cities in Wales, and I think that they can't, in the same way that Wales can't be a little England, Swansea and Newport can't just be little Cardiffs. So I think there's actually quite a lot of imagination within Swansea itself, but I think it needs to be enabled a bit more. I actually think, in terms of how Wales is structured, we talked about kind of a centralisation of power. I don't think we need to add extra layers of bureaucracy, but I do think that actually basing more Welsh government stuff outside of Cardiff would be a really, because there's a reason why, like, public transport services tend to be good where the people who are deciding where the money for public transport live. Like, because it's not just a self-interested thing, it's what you observe, it's what you see. And I think a more equitable spread of, like, where, for good or for bad, the biggest industry in Wales is the public sector. So where we allocate that, how we use things like council pension pots, I think is massively, I think there's 14 billion pounds are currently in Welsh council pension pots, and at the moment I think 1.5% of it's spent in Wales. Like there's ways to think outside the box with it.
Fossil fuels.
Or outside of the
What do you think about the state of transport in Wales at the moment, and what could be improved?
The challenge with Wales is, like, cars are fairly inevitable for lots of people in Wales, but I do think there is I say this having written pretty much endlessly about HS2 and trains, but I think buses is demonstrably the most efficient way to reduce poverty, because more people tend not to use trains. Like buses, and also, like, if you want to get a new bus route up, you can do it in about 6 weeks if you've got the will to do it. It's going to take you about 10 years to get a train line going. So even though I'm a bit of a nerd, I'm excited by the plans for a more linked up bus network. I think that in itself is good. I think, but public transport is a habit, and we know that after the pandemic that had it ended for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think we need more young people to vote in order to get policies that incentivise young people to stay in Wales and prevent more less brain drain?
This is the first election with a turnout above 50%. I always have sympathy with the kind of politicians should give people a reason to want to vote and should engage people. But I think what's most frustrating about covering Wales is, in general elections, the turnout in Scotland and Wales is pretty much exactly the same. But sometimes we've had devolved elections where 20 percentage points more people have voted in Scotland than in Wales. So it isn't that people in Wales are less likely to vote generally, it's just they are not engaged with their own parliament. I do think that will change. Like we've just had, this is the second election where we've had people voting who lived the entirety of their life with a devolved government. And that, once that becomes the norm, I think that helps. I think also, we need more people engaged in politics, but now people like to blame the media for a lack of political engagement, but I generally think, especially private media, private media tends to just go where interest is. I think schools have a really, really big role. I think political literacy being taught in schools, the lack of that, I think is really hard. If you're an adult and you're politically disengaged, there isn't a lot that the media are going to be able to do to make you suddenly start voting and understanding stuff. Because as an adult, once you don't understand something, you tend to just go, I'm not interested in that. Whereas when you're a kid, you're a sponge and you want to understand it and you want to enjoy it. And and you're inherently curious about it.
What do you think about what's going on in the UK government at the moment and how it might... it's very hard to know. I think this is in relation to the possibility... Well, we're going to have a new Prime Minister at some point in the next 3 months. Obviously, depending on who that is, there's definitely some shepherding of who that might be. What are your thoughts about how that might affect the government in Wales? And I know that's a tough one to answer because we don't know what's going on.
So
there's instability though at the moment.
So let's assume that it's going to be done.
Never heard of it.
I made at the start of each year I make predictions. Some of them are really obvious, and then sometimes I make kind of bold ones. And my prediction, which I'm really excited about, is that I actually predicted there would be I got a lot wrong, by the way. The one prediction I'm quite excited by is I predicted a bromance between Rena Purif and Andy Burnham. And that at the time was predicated on Starmer going, Burnham becoming an MP, him managing to oust him. And actually, when Starmer's resignation happened, I was actually sitting with Mark Drakeford. No cheese. And he was like giddy. And giddy Mark Drakeford is a weird thing. His jumper was all baggy. But he was really excited because he genuinely believes that Andy Burnham fully subscribes to the Gordon Brown report, which has within it, which states within it that anything that is devolved to Scotland on principle should be allowed to be devolved to Wales if the Senate wishes it, which is a mindset shift after Boris Johnson, muscular unionism, Keir Starmer, just general indifference, would be a huge, huge change. I think the challenge is going. I think Burnham probably genuinely has got a better, for want of a better word, outlook on devolution. But I think the challenge that you're going to have with Burnham is he's going to be surrounded by a Whitehall machinery, which is going to be pointing at lots of other competing priorities. And I'm sceptical about where devolution will come. But you've got a lot of Welsh Labour MPs who are now going, oh, everyone in this Senate's gone. What are we going to do? And I think I don't think they really understand why they lost still, especially the Labour MPs. I really don't think they get it. I spoke to a Labour MP last week who genuinely thinks the reason that Welsh Labour lost was because they were too far away from the UK government. It's an indictment of Drakeford's policies. And don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of reasons to criticise Mark Drakeford's government, but they haven't clicked that they just stopped seeming Welsh enough.
I don't think this Mr. Rom, this is not me speaking. I was at the TUC Cymru Congress where Reem did his first public speech and discussed social partnerships. What do you think the role of trade unions will be with the new Plaid government?
Right, I think Plaid at the moment are very keen to engage with everyone. You've seen it with like the messaging coming out from the civil service Plaid is that this is like the greatest relationship ever. Yeah, I think it is. In terms of trade unions, like there's never been a kind of lower watermark for the trade unions and Labour, so you know there's an opportunity here. I mean, Plaid have made all the right mood music towards them, but the problem is they're going to come up to the inevitable fact that there's loads of demands on them and there's not much room.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is Cymraeg. Obviously, we haven't talked about the Welsh language, and there are various kind of feelings about how the Welsh language has actually kind of had a revival or not, and I've debated this with people left, there and back again, whatever. Obviously, we have Plaid-led government now. What do you think about how the Welsh language, obviously the address of the Welsh language will be different? How do you think that will affect government in the next few years?
I want to say this is obviously quite long and it's been really hot. You'll have been drinking water and some of these benches aren't comfy. If you need to just go to
one more question.
I mean, you can see it in the output from the Welsh government how the Welsh language has been celebrated in a lot of their messaging, and I don't see how that could be anything other than a good thing. So I think it's. I mean, no one now is not who speaks Welsh is not raising their kids to speak Welsh, which 50 years ago, 30 years ago, that's what it is. And it's we know from all the data that young people in Wales, if you are under 30, you are far more likely to say that you are Welsh than you are British, or you are British and Welsh, or Welsh and British. People in Wales are more comfortable with their Welshness than they've been in living memory, according to the data. And so the kind of embodiment of Welshness in Cymraeg is, I think, rightly celebrated.
Fantastic. And it is, yes, we're 8 o'clock now, and well, I've got one question, which is, could you, I don't know who asked this, but thank you for this question. Could you ask Will, whose coat is that jacket, please? I thank him for all his wonderful work. Go answer it.
I don't know, this was just... Sounds awful. This was just on the floor as I left. And yeah, it was just, I can't have the sun on my skin anymore. And this was the nearest thing to me.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming in today, especially with your third event on a 37-degree day. I'm assuming you're going to, your books have sold out, haven't they, most places?
Yeah, they sold out the second print run.
Which is fantastic.
I spoke to some of you out there and you were all very lovely. Thank you for, there's a pretty good chance that some of you are like newsletter subscribers. You're not just paying my mortgage, you're paying the mortgage of 2 other reporters. You're paying for our office, you're paying for us to go to party conferences and ask questions, and I'm absolutely humbled that people are willing to put their hand in their pocket, and we're working really hard to try and advocate for the country that we all love. But like, it's nice to be able to see people in person and say thank you. So thank you.
Yeah, and if any of you don't subscribe, comes up
and also big thanks to West Europe, but also to Jude, who when I saw her, I realised how much better presented she was. And I was like, oh, I look like
my mother's here.
I look like I've just slept in the woods.
No, thanks for coming here today. Thank you all for coming. Are you running back to Cardiff now, or?
I'll tell you soon.
Yes.
But I'll say.
I'm not going to be rude. Okay, thank you very much for coming in. Well, dear Marianne, thank you.